Today I am going to be answering bookish questions as quickly as possible, so let's get started. Hey guys, I'm Sarah Cater and you're watching Aliens, Clones, and Airships. Ebook versus physical book. I have a hard time reading ebooks only because the screen is very bright and it ends up hurting my eyes, which distracts me from reading. I like the weight of a physical book better. I like being able to turn pages rather than just clicking on a screen. Paperback versus hardback. Paperback to me is way too flimsy. I end up bending them way too easily, which I don't like because then the spine gets creases in it and I would much rather it be completely uniform. One of the books that I have up there, you can not really see it because it's behind Dr. Strange, but it has like 4 to 5 different creases in it. That's because I've read that book so often that it ended up bending, and I try really hard to take care of my books. However, they crease over time. I would much rather have a hardback because then you get the dust jacket on it. The spine ends up not being as damaged. Which do you prefer, online or brick and mortar shopping? I would much rather have that interaction with the books, being able to pick them up, look at them, flip through them. I really like browsing that way, whereas when you go to Amazon, you kind of already have to know what you're looking for when you start your search and then look at the recommended reading. That's the nice part about any online store, that you can see other books that are related, but I would much rather have the personal connection with going into a bookstore and interacting with other bookish people. So I feel like we lose that personal feeling when you go online and you just sit down at home and you're like this. Trilogy versus series. I read a lot of trilogies and I am writing a trilogy, so I'm a little bit biased. I would much rather a series not take away from the plot. I don't really like series that draw out scenes as much as possible so they sell more books. I feel like that's a waste of time and a waste of creativity. I would much rather read a series or trilogy or whatever it takes to get the plot across in the best possible way for the storyline. I really started getting annoyed with the House of Night series when it seemed like they were drawing it out just for the sake of making more books. The first few were amazing and I loved them, and then over time some of the books were over a span of 3 days, and to me that's just like, okay, come on, where are you going with this? Really, it just depends on the story, the plot, and the author and the way that they can get what they want across. Heroes or villains? I feel like villains are so underrated and people do not give them enough credit. If done right, you actually can feel for the villain at points. Even though heroes are doing the right thing and you're supposed to be rooting for heroes, villains have a much more interesting story to tell because you get to see why they're doing the things that they're doing, what their possible morals are. I'm gonna give an example. The Walking Dead, I really like Negan's character because he is just so complex, has certain standards for what he will allow to happen in his group of saviors, but at the same time he's ruthless and he kills, and it's just really interesting to see the lines he's willing to cross, and I think that makes his character very interesting because he does have morals, but they're just very different than the hero. What is a book that I want everyone to read? The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. That book itself is not very scary. It's got some elements to it that are creepy and it would be terrifying to be in the girl's situation. However, for people who are just starting out in the horror genre, it is a good starting point. What is the most underrated book? Imperial Illusions. Talking about Imperial Illusions, it's about a girl named Merina who is put in a coma by a criminal named the Patriarch. He is angry with Merina for not paying for her mother's addictions, so he gets in a fight with her and ends up putting her in a coma. The doctor realizes immediately who had put her there, his nemesis, the Patriarch, and he wants to seek revenge on the Patriarch for something that happened in his past. While he goes and tries to find the Patriarch, he gives Merina a type of medicine to help her with her coma that ends up putting her in this fantasy world state in her mind. And it's really fascinating to see what happens to Merina in this fantasy world as the medication is working in her body, and as it slowly starts to go away, how the beautiful and amazing fantasy world starts turning extremely dark. Well, I think that a lot of people would enjoy it, and I don't know why it hasn't gone viral yet. What was the last book that I finished? The Stars Never Rise by Rachel Vincent, which I gave a review about. Definitely go check that out if you haven't already. The book that I'm reading now is called After She's Gone by Lisa Jackson. I haven't been able to finish it as quickly as I normally would because I am actually having trouble with the format of the book, which is making it harder for me to read. The paragraphs are single-spaced rather than double-spaced, and a lot of the books I read are double-spaced, so I think that's kind of throwing me off because I'm rereading lines by accident and then I have to reread the entire paragraph to remember what was going on. The content itself is really great, so I can't wait to finish it. It's just I am having trouble finishing it for that reason. Stay tuned for the review about that, and I'm probably also going to do a video in the future about how formatting for me in a book is extremely important. What is the last book that I bought? I have to tell you about 5 because I bought them all at the same time, and I'm going to show you 2 books from the same series, The Dark Army and The Dark Assassin by Joseph Delaney. These books are the sequel to the sequel. Help me, I've lost that term. Companions to A New Darkness, which is a companion series to The Last Apprentice by Joseph Delaney. You wouldn't have to have read The Last Apprentice in order to enjoy reading the Wardstone Chronicles, which I believe is the name of this other series that he wrote. But if you are reading The Last Apprentice, you should read that before you pick up this companion series because it takes place right after The Last Apprentice series ends. The next book that I got is Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman, which is the second book companioning the first, which is called Scythe. I really just loved the covers and I love Neal Shusterman's writing, so I'm very excited to read this series. If it's anything like Unwind in terms of writing style, probably going to love these as well. Another book that I got was Children of Blood and Bone, and I am so excited to read it. The last book that I got in my book haul is the sequel to The Stars Never Rise by Rachel Vincent, which is called The Flame Never Dies. If it's anything like the first book, which I raved about in my review, then I'm going to love this book because it is just so strange. Next question is, what have I used that is strange as a bookmark? Tags from new pants and shirts. I've used napkins at restaurants before, and probably the weirdest thing I've used was when I was in a hurry to use the restroom and didn't want to lose my page, so I took the snack I was eating, which was an apple, and I put that on the page. Luckily it wasn't bitten into, so no food was like dripping onto the pages. I would absolutely hate that, but it was like a fresh apple. I just put it in the pages so I could run to the bathroom and come back and not lose my place. I feel like you can really use anything and be creative and improvise. There's no reason to lose your place in a book. You can literally use anything as long as it's not something disgusting. Used books, yes or no? Yes, I would much rather have a new book, but in terms of used books, just because someone else touched it doesn't mean that it is now suddenly unreadable. The only thing that creeps me out is I just don't know where the books have been, and I get these images of people taking them into the bathroom and it kind of freaks me out, so I have to like push that aside. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with used books. I love reading from the library, so those have definitely been used multiple times. And the idea of holding a book that someone else held and had as part of their life for the time it took to read it is really a fascinating idea, and being able to take that same book and put it in my life is a surreal feeling. I have answered this question twice now. What are my top 3 favorite genres? I will give you 4: dystopian, horror, science fiction, and fantasy. Boom. Do I like to borrow books or buy books? I would much rather own a book and have it on my shelves whether I like it or not after reading. I will want to have it because it became a piece of my life. Also, that thing about it already being used and I don't really know and had it in some place that was dirty, or if they're the kind of person who like licks their fingers to turn a page, that just creeps me out. The idea of your saliva in a book is just kind of creepy to me. I would much rather own a book and know where that book has been than use someone else's book and then have to give it back, because then they won't know what I've done with their book. And not that I would ever do anything creepy with the book, because I love and respect books, but it's just the same kind of thing. I want to make sure that the book I'm reading is being respected the way I want it to be respected, and I may not respect it in the way that the person who owned it would have respected it. Also, I'm not the kind of person who likes handing out my books to other people. It kind of scares me because I am afraid they're gonna dog ear my pages, which no, don't do that. It's, oh, I'm cringing just thinking about it. Next question is, do I like characters or plot better? Plot, because I would much rather have a very interesting plot with very dull characters, because at least the plot is going somewhere. But if you have characters that are well written without a good plot, it's like, why am I investing myself into this story? Yes, the characters are fantastic, but the story isn't doing them justice. Do I like long or short books better? Do I like long or short chapters better? It really just depends on what it takes to tell a story the best it can possibly be told. I don't want to read anything that makes the book unbearable to read. What are the first 3 books I can think of? It's Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and It by Stephen King. What books made me laugh or cry? One of the books that made me laugh really hard was Princess Mia by Meg Cabot. I loved that book and I bought it thinking it was the first or second book in the series and ended up being the last. So I read it out of order for the series, and it's a big series, so I feel like I can't go back and reread the whole series now that I've read the last one. It's kind of just giving away everything. And the book that made me cry was The Hunger Games. I was reading it at midnight and I was sobbing. I was surprised I didn't wake anybody when I first read that book because I was crying so hard. I think the next day I ran downstairs to my mom and dad and I was like, guys, the worst thing just happened in this book. And they're like, Sarah, chill, it's a book. All these emotions for these characters, and then I think about them for like hours later. Everyone's like, Sarah, it was a book. It's over. The book is over. Why are you still talking about it? I feel like I know these characters. Our world or fictional worlds. There are so many stressors going on in my life constantly, and sometimes it's nice to escape through fictional worlds. I can go away for a while from this world by reading a book and then take what I learned in that book or calm down and then come back into this world when I'm done reading the book and have a fresh perspective or fresh state of mind. In audiobooks, yes or no? The answer is yes. There's nothing wrong with listening to an audiobook. To me, it's still considered reading. I want to listen to audiobooks anytime I have a really long drive because I feel like when I'm driving, I'm not being productive, if that makes sense. So I would much rather fill that time with something where I also feel productive, but it's not going to distract me from driving. Because reading a book while driving probably is dangerous and against the law and would hurt someone, and I don't really want to do that. Listening to an audiobook is the next best thing. Do I judge books by their covers? Duh. Yes, of course I judge books by their cover. If your cover is not fantastic or doesn't represent your book, I feel like you have not put in enough love and care into the writing as well, and why should I read your book if you don't even care about it? I know that's a very harsh way of thinking about it, but I know that marketing is key. A book cover really will sell your book, so if you don't give it everything you've got in order to sell your book, then no one's gonna want to read it. No one's gonna want to display that on their shelves at home. Do I like book to movie adaptations or book to TV adaptations better? It depends on the series. I will give you the example of A Series of Unfortunate Events. Loved the book series, and then I liked the feel of the movie, but I love the fact that they are doing every single book as an episode for the TV show. The TV show itself is too funny to me. I feel like it doesn't have enough of the dark nature that the books had, which made me really love them. I think they're making it a little bit too humorous, and while Count Olaf is supposed to be a funny character, he's also supposed to be evil and morbid and crazy. Neil Patrick Harris, while I love him, only portrays Count Olaf as humorous and not quite evil. I liked the way that Jim Carrey played Count Olaf better in the movie, and I liked the feeling of the movie better because it was very dark and it had more of a steampunk feel to it, which I love. However, I hated the way they ended the movie because they took the first book, the second book, and the third book, made a movie of it, but then made the ending of the movie the ending of the first book. Who does that? What movie or TV show did I like better than the book? I hated the ending of Breaking Dawn, the book. It was so anticlimactic, and I had gone through the entire series loving it, and then I got to the ending and I was like, what the hell? And I almost threw the book. Like, I was so angry at that book, I almost threw it. The movie did a much better job wrapping everything up. If Stephanie Meyer had written it the way that the movie ended, it was just a better way to end it, and I know she was kind of going for that with the way she wrote it, but it was so unclear. And then the other book that did that was Mockingjay. I hated the ending of Mockingjay only because I didn't quite understand it and it felt really rushed to me. But then when I watched the movie, I had a better understanding of the way that the book ended. The way that they executed it in the movie was better than the way she had written it. The last question is, do I like series or standalones better? And this goes along with the other questions that I responded to, where it really just depends on how much it takes for you to tell the story without it being dragged out or rushed. Well, those are the answers to the rapid fire book tag. I will see you next time. Bye!